NFL and the Philadelphia Eagles are in Landover, Maryland to take on the Washington Commanders and improve to 7-1, we hope, on this season. We'll be breaking it all down right here on the Malamut Law pregame show with yours truly, Mark Farzetta, and, of course, my co-host today and every week, Bill Colarulo, Seth Joyner, and Eagles veteran reporter Derek Gunn as well. Fellas, the last time these two teams met, we know this one went to overtime in a 34-31 victory for the Birds. Now this Eagles team is very different, at least when you look at that secondary. What is Howie going to do next? You got the trade deadline coming up on Tuesday, but let's talk about what he has done so far when we talk about adding Kevin Byard to the pack here. And then also Jalen Hurts' knee. What is the injury status? What is the health status? Is it something he just has to simply push through? We'll talk about it all today during the pregame show. But Gunnar, let me start with you first and foremost. Let's talk about the health of our quarterback in Jalen Hurts. Throughout the week, he said it was something that did not happen in the Jets game. It's just something that he's dealing with right now. What do you know? What's the latest? How much is it hindering his play, if at all?
It's not hindering his play any more than what we've seen of him for most of this season, but it is the biggest mystery of the Eagles this season in terms of when exactly did he get hurt. He said it wasn't the Jets game. They've said it wasn't the Rams game. But we have been talking throughout this season about noticing that his gait is noticeably slower than what we've seen him be in 2022. We've wondered, is it deliberate because he's taking care of himself? We've also wondered if the coaching staff has instructed him to better protect himself to get down. And when you look at some of the freak accidents that have happened to some of the quarterbacks already across the National League, it makes sense. But the big side story is, if he's been injured, why hasn't this come up on an injury report? Because even when players have flu-like symptoms, that is also put on an injury report. Yet the Eagles have never put him on an injury report. He's played every game, but this story is starting to pick up more and more steam about why the Eagles have not had to put him on an injury report. So we don't know exactly how hurt or not hurt he really is.
There's one thing I trust. I trust that it did not happen in the Jets game. I think it happened much earlier than that. I think it happened much earlier in the season. And he has just been trying to push through this. Because Seth and Bill, we've looked at this all season long and said he does not look the same. Look, the Eagles right now are 6-1. Things are sitting pretty as far as I'm concerned when it comes to this Eagles team. But when you look at the quarterback, he just physically does not look like he is capable of the same things that we saw in years past from Jalen Hurts. Seth, what are you seeing?
I think it's something that kind of comes and goes, because we've seen times throughout the season where he's had a burst, and we're like, man, he looks like he's fine right there. And then we've also had these times throughout the season where it's like, man, he doesn't look the same.
Right.
You know, so, I mean, you take into consideration the fact of, you know, how much trouble the Eagles would be in if it's discovered that they hadn't been putting him on the injury list. So they're not going to tell you when he got hurt. You know, that's just common sense. That would be like telling on yourself. And then conversely, this week, he doesn't even show up on the injured list after coming out late after halftime and putting a knee brace on the knee. You know that they're doing some treatment on him during the week. You know that there's something going on, but to save their behinds, they're not putting them on the injury list. You know, so listen, I don't think it's that much of a concern, because I think this is something that's going to be perpetual for him this year. Nobody knows exactly what the circumstances or what the situation is. He's played well. He's looked like he's himself at times, and at other times he's looked like he's not himself 100%. Yet the team is still 6-1. And to be quite honest with you, I would much rather see him play from the pocket than to see him run around anyway. So, you know, if he's got the brace on, you're only going to see him run when he has to run.
And I thought it was interesting this week when he was addressing the media. He said, I've never been hurt outside the pocket. And I'm like, does he not remember the Bears game last year? Because that was outside the pocket, unfortunately.
Yes,
Bill, I know you spoke to a doctor on your show.
Barely outside the pocket.
It's still outside the pocket. No, but Bill, you spoke to a doctor earlier in the week on the Philly Sports Power Hour right here on JAKIB Media, and that doctor had he was not treating. It was one of those cases, not treating Jalen Hurts, of course, but from what he deduced from his medical background, there was a particular issue he thinks Jalen Hurts is dealing with.
And you've heard it from some other people as well, that he's probably dealing with an MCL-type strain. Now, the good news with that is it's something that can heal itself. That's why they put the brace on, maybe just to give him a little bit more stability. But this doctor didn't feel that it was anything to worry about. I had Dave Spadaro, the Eagles insider, on my show as well, said, look, it's a non-story. Because I said to Spadaro, look, I know you need to be tight-lipped. You work for the team. He goes, I'm not being tight-lipped. This is a non-story. Jalen Hurts is fine. But I think we'll see today, does he have that burst? We all assumed it was just him being a little more cautious when he ran the football, but it looks like there's probably something more there that's slowing him down.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that concerns me. I mean, you go back to as far as, week 2 in the season, and we were all watching the Bucs game, seeing him slide well short of the first down marker when he had a lot of room in front of him, and for whatever reason, he just went down 5 yards short of the first down marker. Very curious, but of course, we'll see how this all plays out in this game. So, yes, Seth, to your point, comes and goes. We'll see if it is not there today at least.
I think the biggest telling point in talking about this topic is when Jalen was asked, will this be a problem moving forward? And he looked at him dead face and said, we'll see.
Yeah.
That's the biggest red flag out of all the speculation that's going on. I love Dave Spadaro to death, a great friend of mine. David's going to tell you what you want to hear. He's not going to tell you.
Now, the only thing with me, D-Gun, is him saying we'll see, Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
Sometimes I take that as a positive because last year, when he had that shoulder injury,
right,
they were very tight-lipped about it. He acted as if he wasn't hurt at all,
Absolutely.
And it was more serious than we thought.
Yep.
So him maybe saying, we'll see, makes me think, well, maybe he's really not hurt. Maybe they're playing mind games with us.
It's last year's good enough. If you remember last year when he hurt his shoulder, is the shoulder good? Good enough. Well, good enough for what? Good enough.
Good enough.
Yeah.
And so much so that I remember Joel Embiid even talking about his knee, saying same thing from Jalen Hurts. Good. I'll say what Jalen said. Good enough.
Yeah.
Good enough to play.
And if you remember after the season, all of a sudden a little bit more came out about the fact that people don't understand. For the last month or so, Jalen was dealing with a shoulder injury. Couldn't extend himself 100%, but was good enough to get to the Super Bowl. So good enough, and we'll see, I guess, are some of his favorite words. If he steps out on that field today with a knee brace, which is the protect, that tells me it's week to week. See, that tells me all I need to know if he puts that knee brace on, because we're not used to seeing quarterbacks in general wear knee braces unless they're protected.
I'm in the camp of it being a non-issue, because there's not a single player in the National Football League today that's not dealing with something.
Absolutely.
Sure. Okay. So if he could come out at halftime of last week's game and manage to put together what he put together last week and the team could still win, then I would go so far as to say that it truly is a non-issue, in my opinion. I just think that they are in protective mode because of the trouble that they'd be in if they find out that they skirted the injury report. And Jalen's just, he's like Nick Saban. He's going to give you just what you need, and that's it. No more, no less.
I'm with it. I know there's some people. I see some people here in the chat. Jay, what's up, Jay? Saying stop manufacturing a crisis. This is something that the Eagles quarterback himself has acknowledged. He's the franchise quarterback. We hope he's the franchise quarterback here for a long time. So we'd like to know that he's just 100% healthy or as close to as possible. Now, I mentioned it's a little bit of a different secondary now with the Philadelphia Eagles. Reed Blankenship's coming back with his from his rib injury, obviously. And now Kevin Byard, a two-time All-Pro, has been thrown into this secondary courtesy of Howie Roseman's latest wheelin' and dealin'. Trade deadline, of course, comes up on Tuesday at 4 p.m. But as of right now, what was your reaction, Seth? I'll start with you when it comes to adding Kevin Byard to the secondary.
I said, I text the day that it came out. I was like, Howie freaking Roseman has done it again. It's phenomenal. The way that he's able to maneuver for Terrell Edmonds, who's not very much of a player, and a fifth and a sixth rounder. You go and you bring in a Pro Bowler. It's just amazing, what he's been able to do. When he's needed to go get a player, he's found a way to, to swindle a player out of some team somewhere. And I'm flabbergasted, to be honest with you, that that teams even take his calls anymore, because this is going to be huge. I mean, you get Reed Blankenship back today. Nick Sirianni pretty much said that Kevin Byard is going to play the entire game. So that tells me that he's already familiar with the system. He already understands what it is that they're trying to do. That takes a little pressure off of having to play Sidney Jones at the safety position. And when you want to go some three safeties, now you got your third safety that you can actually insert in the game and get really creative with. He's a playmaker, 27, interceptions in his career. This is a massive, massive get for the Eagles at this point in time.
Is Howie done yet, Gunner?
What do you know about Howie Roseman?
He's never done.
The man's never sleep. I would think if they make any other particular move before their trade deadline, it was to get a little bit more depth at the offensive line. I don't see them needing much of anything else. You might say, well, they might want another veteran cornerback, but you have to give these young guys room to grow. We see the potential in the like of the young secondary of the Eli Ricks, the Sidney Browns. You've got to let these guys grow a little bit. You have 2 Pro Bowl corners to mentor these guys, and there may come a point in time you may need that youth down the stretch. And if we've seen flashes of them looking good, and we've seen flashes of them making some rookie mistakes. That's the natural progression they're going to go through. But I would say if there's one weakness that they have to look at, it would be getting some more depth along the offensive line, if anything.
All right, so add to the offensive line sounds good, something they're always looking for in the trenches there.
Absolutely.
Bill, one of the interesting things, though, about this move here, going back to Kevin Byard, is that the Eagles' secondary, as much as we've had some criticism for it, you're talking about the 3rd best defense in all in the NFL in terms of total points per game. And now the Eagles have added a guy like Kevin Byard to that mix. They have also added a guy that's extremely versatile. They had a guy last year join them who had only been a nickel corner before in the NFL, in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, all of a sudden turned him into a Pro Bowl caliber safety. So now they're adding him into the mix, this guy and Kevin Byard here. How much does this elevate the Eagles' play going forward?
I think it's going to elevate their play immensely. And you look at this Eagles defense, they've been a different defense since they let Sam Howell throw for 258 in Week 4. In the next 3 games, these passing offenses are averaging 183 yards a game. And yeah, the Jets weren't very good at throwing the football, but they did that against the Los Angeles Rams and then the Miami Dolphins, the #1 passing offense in the league. And Terrell Edmonds played 100% of the defensive snaps. They shut down the #1 offense in the league. And Howie Roseman says, yeah, but you know what? Bring in an all-pro safety. Love what they did there. Absolutely love what they did. But you ask D. Gunn if Howie's finished. A move I'd like to see them make is on the offensive side of the football, and that would be to bring in a big-bodied running back. We've talked about it before, but I went and looked at the stats. You look at the last 4 games, as good as we like to say this rushing offense is, running backs averaged 3.9 yards per carry against Washington, 3.6 yards per carry against the Rams, 2.3 yards per carry against the Jets, and 3.4 yards a carry against the Dolphins. So we had those 2 big games early on in the season, Week 2 and Week 3, which is keeping this rushing offense in the top of the league. They haven't been as good over the last 4 weeks, and I'd really like to see a compliment to DeAndre Swift. A lot of people are telling me, oh, he's already on the roster. It's Rashad Penny.
Right.
Well, clearly they don't have trust in this guy, or he'd be dressing on game days. So I don't think it's Derrick Henry. Don't get excited in the chat. I don't think it's Derrick Henry. But a big-bodied back to complement DeAndre Swift, I think would go a long way for this offense.
I disagree. And this is why I disagree, Bill, because the Eagles don't want to run the football. Mm-hmm. That's pretty damn evident. You know, they do not want to run the football because those numbers, you know, they speak volumes. You know, how low per carry they're averaging. But the truth of the matter is, you know, in those games that you talked about, I want you to go and extrapolate out just the runs by the running back and tell me how many you get. They're not running the football enough for those numbers to make sense, especially against the Jets where they only ran the ball 14 times. They handed the ball to the running backs 14 times on the offensive side of the ball. Now, the stats will say 18 total calls or 22, but that's not the truth. The truth is they handed the ball to the running backs 14 times in those games, okay? So if you're not committed to handing the ball off, you're not committing to establishing the run, you know, it's just like 2 weeks ago. They started off, you know, we'll go back to the Jets game. They started off and they ran the ball the first 2 times. They ran it for 1 yard, then they ran it for -2 yards. You know, that kind of set the stage and set the precipice for, oh, we can't run the ball, so we're just going to throw it all over the place. You know, and that's the mindset that they have. If they start off and they're running the ball with any kind of, with any kind of success, then they continue to run the football. It becomes a part of their plan. Or if they get stymied, you know, throwing the ball all over the map, then they revert back to the running game, you know, which actually works. But never do they come out and just say, okay, we're going to establish the running game first. And once we establish the running game, then we're going to open everything else up. You know, they do not really want to run the football. What they want to do is they want to throw the ball all over the map, and because of that, those numbers look skewed, and they're going to look even more skewed because, when you throw Jalen Hurts into the mix, then it's like, they're averaging 150 yards per game rushing or whatever that number is, but, Jalen Hurts is averaging 40, 50 yards a game himself. Well, if you're only going to give your running backs the ball 14 times a game, how much success do you think you're going to have? The really good football teams that run the ball with some kind of efficiency, they're balanced, or they're close to balanced, or there's at least some kind of attempt to say, okay, we need to establish the run. We need to be balanced to keep offenses honest, and I just don't see that's not in the Eagles' MO. The Eagles want to throw the football, and they're not going to revert back. They're going to run it every once in a while, or if they get in a situation where they're not throwing the ball as efficiently as they want to, then they're going to turn around and they're going to run the ball. And this whole concept about the short passing game to the back in the flat and swing routes, that's an extension of the running game. That's just BS, because if that was your MO, when the running game isn't working, then you would lean more on a guy like DeAndre Swift and Kenneth Gainwell in the short passing game. But no, what you do is you get greedy, because you want to push the ball down the field instead of earning the right to push it down the field by running the ball and taking the short routes and making the defense play up and then taking your shot down the field.
Bill, I agree with what a lot of people are saying as far as Rashad Penny, what you're saying about Rashad Penny. I think the guy that's going to help them in the run game is on the roster right now, but it's not Rashad Penny. Boston Scott, but I was thinking more along the lines of Brian Johnson. Maybe called run plays would be the way to help establish that, first and foremost, because I don't necessarily think it's a lack of production. I think it's a lack of commitment to it. Mm-hmm. Now, the Jets game, to a degree, I understand, simply because there were so many injured members of the secondary for the Jets. But still, the Eagles
I would say, so what, Farzy?
But I agree. Do what makes you the best version of yourself.
Who are you, and what's your identity?
Mm-hmm.
By the time you get to this time of the season, you should have an identity, and you should be sticking to that identity. Now, I get it. You can't come out and just hand the ball off every game and try to establish the run. Some games, what you do is you establish the run through the pass, and some games it's vice versa.
Sure.
But they came out just throwing the ball all over the map. Mm. They threw the ball 16 out of 19 plays on the first drive against the New York Jets. So it was clear that they were trying to go after the two young cornerbacks that were outside, okay? But when they realized that Jalen Hurts was having an off day, that it wasn't going so well, that Murphy's Law was in effect, that any and everything that could go wrong was going wrong. Fumble, bounced off the chest, hit the arm interception, all these things going on. Don't keep doing that. Don't keep doing the same thing expecting a different result. Put your quarterback in a position where he can succeed when he's having an off day instead of trying to force the issue. It makes no sense to me, the way that they operate sometimes.
I got news for you. I expect us to be sitting here on the postgame show talking about the Eagles throwing the ball a lot more than running the ball, because if there's one thing that Washington's defense does well, which is not many, it's defend against the run. They did as well a job as anybody could possibly do defending against this team's run the last time. Held them to 104 yards. I think the Eagles are going to be forced to throw the football a lot more, which means Jalen's probably going to have another 300-yard passing day.
All right, we'll continue to kick around the running game, though, and how it can help the passing game later on. But first, we got to tell you about our friends at Del Val. Save 40% on your car insurance right now. You call our friends, Fran or Jim, right now with Del Val Insurance. Here's a word from Del Val.
My name is Fran Salerno, and I'm a managing director here at Del Val Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.
Welcome back to the Malamut Law pregame show. Mark Farzetta, Bill Colarulo, Eagles Hall of Famer Seth Joyner, and Eagles veteran reporter Derek Gunn joining us on the panel. Adam Malamut himself will be joining us momentarily. We're previewing Week 8 matchup between the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles looking to improve to 7-1 right now. Just the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles 6-1 with the best records in the NFL. The Cowboys are taking on the Rams later today. Jets are taking on the Giants, so it's going to be an NFC battle today, obviously. Looking at a lot of different things about this game, and particularly the Eagles' run game and what they need to do in order to keep it going. Now, one name we haven't mentioned, gentlemen, that could also help this run game is a guy named Cam Jurgens. So, Bill, when you look back on your numbers, how much have they been affected, really, since Cam Jurgens has not been on that offensive line?
It's definitely been a factor. Like I said, we're looking at the average yards per carry for these backs, and even overall, when you include Jalen Hurts' numbers, they've dipped since Cam Jurgens has left. And I agree with Seth. They have not committed to the run. But you look at last week against the Dolphins, as good as they played, they did run the football with their backs 23 times. I just think, to Seth's point about when the passing game doesn't work and you have to lean on your run, do they have running backs that could really carry the load late in the season? As good as DeAndre Swift is, and I think he still needs to be your number one back. He has the ability to hit a home run every time he touches the football. Prior to this season, he had only carried the ball more than 15 times in a game twice. So I think as this season goes on, and it gets later on into the year, the weather starts to change. It was a real luxury last year to be able to lean on that running game when the passing game wasn't working, and I'm just not sure they have enough depth at that running back position with who they have right now.
I am very curious because since the start of the season, I mean, Rashad Penny, it was all about if he stays healthy, this guy can really help the Eagles out of the backfield. Gunnar, why has there been such a miscommunication between the front office and the coaching staff about Rashad Penny? I'll put it to you like this. It's a very blunt question, but why is he even still on the team?
Everything that I've been told consistently when you mention his name is insurance policy. Insurance policy. They've identified early in the season that Gainwell and DeAndre Swift are going to be their main backs. And because of Penny's injury history, basically he's a protectant if somebody goes down for a significant amount of time, which I've never seen the Eagles basically do in any other year except this particular year. They identified that he still has a little bit left in the tank, but they're a little worried about his health status. So say somebody goes down in late November, December, you've got somebody already in the fall who's not just a rookie you have on a practice squad, somebody, number one, who's now well-versed in your offense. Number two, is a proven veteran and a proven commodity. And let's face it, he's a bigger back that runs between the tackles. You talk about that bigger back. He can pound it between the tackles, and he can break away as well. From the Eagles' perspective, if what I've been hearing is true, it's great on their part that they take this approach. Now, if I'm Rashad Penny, I'm ticked off because if you had told me this back in April when you signed me, I don't think I would be signing with the Philadelphia Eagles, especially considering that he's trying to make some more money in 2024.
All right, so when he has been active the few times.
Was he at one carry?
if that. And I will say this, in the very brief amount of time that we've seen, a very limited time, he does look very slow to the line of scrimmage. Doesn't look like exactly someone that's going to explode through the hole that's opened up there by the offensive line. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously a concern.
Well, it's a concern, but then we ask the question, the Eagles are smart enough. What do we know about Howie Roseman? When they identify something they need, he goes out and gets it. He did it last year. C.J. G.J., Linval Joseph, and Ndamukong Suh. He did it this year. Bradley Roby, and now, of course, Kevin Byard. Why are they keeping him? It goes back to protecting insurance policy, which is a little bit different from the mindset of the Eagles normally. But I'm not saying I'm against it. But if they didn't tell Penny this when they signed him, then shame on him in that regard.
Yeah, a little bit. One thing I want to get into with Seth, and you're the only one that can answer this question, but I got to ask it. It comes to this last matchup with the Commanders back in Week 4 where you just squeaked out the overtime victory. We always talk about letdown games. We talk about games that might be bulletin board material, what have you. Have you ever won a game and still had a bad taste in your mouth about the way it was played and then use that almost as motivation for the next time you face a divisional opponent, like maybe the Eagles might be looking at this game against the Commanders? Because looking at the records, the Eagles should be the clear-cut favorite. They're a 7-point favorite going into today's game. But looking at this type of matchup as a former player, is it something that you want to get a bad taste out of your mouth for the way the first game ended?
No, I just think that, it's hard to win in the National Football League, period. So any win that you get, is a win well earned. And at this point in time, believe it or not, I talked about it on my show last week. I am beyond, we're paid to analyze what's going on. But the truth of the matter is this team is 6-1, and they really should be 7-1, if they would have made some better decisions. They've got the top record in the entire National Football League, okay? And here we are, complaining about this football team week in and week out. In an imperfect game, we're expecting for this team to come out and show us perfect football. It doesn't work that way. You want to know why? Because if I've got 22 pieces over here and they've got 22 pieces over here, all things being equal, no matter how good or bad one team is better than the other, you still got guys who get paid and guys who got pride and coaches that are smart on the other side. So even your best called plays, sometimes they just don't work. The other team, gets you. In my guy Barrett Brooks' words, sometimes, you get the bear, sometimes the bear gets you. That's really what it comes down to. So I'm just at this place now where, I'm going to sit back and enjoy the ride because, how many times have I had to sit up and do a post-game show, for a bad Eagles team opposed to, a good Eagles team that's actually winning. Now, that's not going to preclude me or us from, delving into the numbers and delving into what we're seeing on the field. But, just to answer your question, you can't approach one game thinking about the last game. The only thing that they need to remember about the last game is how much of a game the Washington Commanders actually made it, and not come into this game thinking, believing, or feeling that all they got to do is show up. Because I don't care how bad a football team is in the National Football League, the Jets proved it. Mm-hmm. They can beat you on any given Sunday if you don't show up and you don't take care of the football and you don't play good defense and you don't do what you're supposed to do and you don't make good coaching decisions, as you go.
I'll ask this question to the entire panel, but it's along those lines. So what do you want to see different in this matchup with the Commanders versus what you saw last time in Week 4? Bill, I'll start with you. You can look at third down conversions. You can look at penalties. That was a huge problem in the first matchup. What do you want to see different from this Eagles team today?
I really want to see that defense shut down Sam Howell and really get after him. I know they had 5 sacks in the last game, but you look at this Washington Commanders offense, they are on a historic pace, giving up 40 sacks through 7 weeks of the season. So I expect 5 sacks. I think they may double that today. But I'd be shocked if you see Sam Howell throw for 258. They held Tua to under 200 yards. They held Matthew Stafford to under 200 yards. So that's where I really think you'll see an improvement is on the defensive side of the football. And you mentioned third down on offense. This offense has been the number 2 offense in the league, the Eagles, on third down conversions. They were only 4-12 in that first game. So I really expect to see them put up a lot of points again. They did put up 34 points, but I think they'll be better on third down. I'm hoping they will be better in the red zone because as bad as this Washington Commanders defense is, the one thing they have done well is they are a top 10 red zone defense. So let's see them carry over what they did against the Dolphins. They were basically 4 or 5. I don't count that last one where they weren't trying to score. 4 or 5 in the red zone. Let's hope that carries over today against a good red zone defense, and they put up 34 points again. But I can't imagine the Washington Commanders putting up 31 on this defense.
I like the prediction of possibly 10 sacks because I didn't think you could do better than the 9 times they sacked Carson Wentz the last time they played at FedEx Field. Gunnar, what do you want to see different from the Week 4 matchup here in this Week 8 matchup?
It has to be the red zone offense for this Eagles team, and especially now that you have Julio Jones in the mix, I want to see them be a little bit more creative. This Eagles offense, as good as it is, we've talked about this time and time again, they don't use a lot of motion to try to get defensive players out of position. They just attack you. Now that you have a proven veteran like a Julio Jones, a big body to go along with a big body like an A.J. Brown, I want to see them attack more in the red zone, put more points in the end zone, not 3s but 7s. They have everything that you can think of in terms of wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, to be a dominant red zone offense. We saw it the last couple of weeks get better. Now we want to see it improve even more so. Julio's been here almost 2 weeks now. unleash him. Let's see what he can bring to the equation as well to make it that much more difficult for a defense to defend.
All right, obviously no one wants to see overtime again, Seth, but what do you want to see in this matchup here?
I'm in Bill's camp. I want to see them play better offensively because there's no way on God's green earth that this offense should have put 31 points up on this defense. And I think the adjustment could, and will be, getting up a little tighter on the wide receivers and making Sam Howell work, make him complete balls against tight coverage. Because what they did last game is they came in and they blitzed Sam quite a bit. But they started showing it early. He saw it, but your cornerbacks were 7 to 10 yards off the ball. So you got Terry McLaurin running these speed outs and slant routes and all this kind of stuff, and the cornerbacks in straight chase mode. Let's get up and challenge these wide receivers at the line of scrimmage. Even if you're in zone, get up and give Sam the illusion, that you're going to play up and tight and then bail. But I want to see them mix it up a little bit, and I want to see them get up in tighter coverage, to make Sam have to throw some of those tight window throws. And that's how you're going to get pressure, because you remember the last time they couldn't even get to him. It seemed like we were just wondering, why aren't they getting there? But what people don't understand, I hear people in these programs talk about it all the time. Oh, well, we need to get to the quarterback. Well, listen, if you're going to play your damn cornerbacks 10 yards off the ball, you ain't going to ever get there, because the most elementary of quarterbacks can look at the situation and see, oh, you got 4 down, your linebackers are stepping up. Well, hell, I'm going to look to my wide receivers and just give them a little head nod. That's my sight adjustment, and we're going to take the quick slant. I'm going to get the ball out of my hand before the pressure can even get there. The pass rush can't get there. Why? Because if you're not covering tight on the back end, if you don't get up on these wide receivers and you don't challenge these wide receivers and this tight end, then guess what? Sam Howell is good enough to stand back there and make throws. Now, has this Eagles coaching staff looked good enough at the game film where Sam Howell has struggled and realized that, these other teams got home because they played tighter coverage? That's what I want to see. And I want to see them play better, in the red zone.
You know what? I agree with you, but I don't think we're going to see what you want to see, because we've been looking at this. We've been screaming about this for the last couple of years under 2 different coordinators. Mm-hmm. You have Pro Bowl caliber cornerbacks. Why are you giving mediocre talent that kind of respect? And that's what they're going to – they'll press just to give them something to look at, maybe one play. I would think if you broke it down in percentages, let's say Washington had 65, 80 plays in a game, I would say less than 7% you're going to see them press cover, because that's the way they play, and it drives you nuts.
Well, what's the difference between, playing a Washington team and playing a Miami team? I mean, listen, you had Tariq Hill, and you held that team way, way under, They had 244 total yards. Yep. I'm not talking about just in the passing game, but total yards, 45 games. So they had 199 total net yards passing last week. So tell me, why is it that you could do that to the high-flying Dolphins, but you can't figure it out against Miami?
I know.
I mean, you can't figure it out against Washington. Well, it makes no sense to me.
Hopefully they figure that one out today. Now, Adam Malamut's going to be joining us momentarily here on the Malamut pregame show. And also, we have a special announcement here on the JAKIB Media pregame show about something going to be going on a little bit later in the season. We'll be back in a few.